I had just landed my first job out of university and moved into a modest apartment about 15 miles from my parents' place. A small, aging building near the beach with thin walls that let in every sound from the neighbors. I was excited to embrace my independence, but nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. A few weeks in, I met Brett at a bar through some mutual friends. Brett was the epitome of a beach bum, a surfer with sun-bleached blonde hair and an easy smile that hid an unsettling quality. Despite his handsome looks, something about him felt off. He never seemed to have a place of his own. Instead, he was always drifting from one friend's sofa to another. We went on a couple of dates, but we never really clicked. I dismissed the nagging feeling in my gut as mere nerves of starting a new chapter in my life. But then the oddities began. One morning, I was sure I had left my hairbrush neatly on my dresser, yet later I found it tangled among my bed sheets as if someone had purposefully placed it there. Then there was my watch. I'd removed it before bed and placed it in my jewelry box, only to find it missing a few days later. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness. I started doubting my own memory, wondering if I was simply losing track of my belongings. The incidents grew more disturbing over the following weeks. In my apartment by the beach, a part of town that wasn't particularly affluent, every noise was magnified by the thin walls. I began to hear faint movements, creaks in the hallway, even whispers that I couldn't quite decipher. A few times while walking past my neighbor's door, I thought I saw a flash of that familiar blonde silhouette of Brett, though he never acknowledged me. I assumed he had moved on, but the unease he left behind seemed to linger in every corner of my apartment. Then came the night of the storm, a night I'll never forget. The wind howled and rain battered the windows as I settled in for the evening. I had a strict nightly routine. Before bed, I'd pull every plug from the sockets to prevent any electrical mishaps. It was something I did without fail, a small ritual of control in an otherwise unpredictable world. I went to bed confident that I had secured my little sanctuary from the chaos outside. The next morning, I awoke to a sight that made my blood run cold. My TV, which I had unplugged just hours before, was now plugged in and humming quietly in the living room. I couldn't understand it. Was I really that forgetful? Or was something or someone tampering with my space? Over the next month, these bizarre occurrences continued. Every little object seemed to have a mind of its own. A misplaced scarf, a rearranged book on my shelf, even the persistent feeling of being watched. I began to question my own sanity. Late one night, just before Christmas, as I lay in bed trying to muster some sleep, I was startled awake by the shrill ring of a phone just after midnight. The sound came from the direction of my living room, and I froze, paralyzed by fear. I couldn't summon the courage to get up, convinced that whoever was on the other end was closer than I'd ever imagined. The following morning, trembling and still unsure of what was real, I texted my neighbor to see if he had received any late-night calls. His reply chilled me further. He'd been out of town. And then it happened again the very next night. The phone had rung once more, echoing through the quiet of my apartment, leaving me sleepless and haunted by the mystery of it all. After weeks of relentless oddities, I finally reached my breaking point. One evening, after discovering yet another inexplicable rearrangement of my belongings, a necklace I was sure I'd tucked away now dangling from a shelf, I decided I couldn't live like this any longer. I called the police and filed a report explaining the eerie events. My hairbrush mysteriously relocated, my watch vanishing from its box, and food disappearing from my fridge. They listened, but all they could offer was a reassuring shrug. "Are you sure you're not misplacing things?" they asked. I left their words feeling isolated, doubting my own sanity. Over the following weeks, the disturbances persisted. Some nights, soft footsteps echoed through the thin walls of my aging apartment building. Other nights, devices would power on by themselves, and I'd catch glimpses of a shadow slipping past the window. The relentless sense of being watched gnawed at me. I even began considering selling the apartment and moving back in with my parents, desperate to escape the inexplicable presence that haunted my new beginning. 3 days after Christmas, my world turned on its head. A firm knock shattered the silence of an early winter morning. I opened the door to find 2 police officers standing there, somber and determined. They explained that a neighboring apartment had recently been sold and the new owners were renovating the space. During their work in the loft, they discovered something that required immediate investigation: a makeshift camp. Inside the loft, among stripped-down beams and bare brick, lay a sleeping bag, a small camping stove, and a scatter of personal belongings. It was clear someone had been living up there. They had also found an ID card tucked inside a battered wallet. My heart sank when I saw the name. Brett, the surfer I had dated months earlier, whose charming smile always masked something unsettling. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Brett hadn't just been a fleeting, awkward encounter. He had been living in the void above my apartment all this time, quietly creeping through ceiling hatches originally meant for builders. Those old hatches, long thought to have been securely boarded up, had offered him a hidden passage into our lives. In that moment, every unsettling memory fell into place. The inexplicable noises, the disappearing items, even those fleeting glimpses of his sun-bleached hair on the beach as I passed by. Now they all painted a disturbing picture of a man who had never truly left my periphery. I felt violated, my safe space invaded by someone I had once barely known, whose true nature revealed itself only in the shadows. I decided then and there to sell the apartment. I couldn't bear the thought of living under the constant specter of being watched. After closing that chapter, I moved into a townhouse where I took extra precautions. The very first thing I did was seal up the loft completely, a final physical barrier against any further intrusion. Life slowly began to feel normal again. My days are now punctuated by the joyful barks of my gorgeous golden lab, Betsy, who sleeps beside me every night, offering the kind of unconditional comfort that had been missing for so long. With Betsy's warm presence and the safety of my new home, I finally reclaimed a sense of security. Still, I can't shake the lingering terror of that secret space overhead. As long as I live, I'll never set foot near a roof space again. The memory of Brett's silent invasion is a haunting reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who hide in plain sight.
Last year, my room was my sanctuary, phone glued to my ear, best friend's voice a comforting buzz. Parents were off on some anniversary jaunt, leaving me the run of the place. Bliss, right? Then, the front door clicked open and shut. I barely registered it. Probably Sarah, I muttered into the phone. She had a row with Mikey. Sarah, my sister, was supposed to be at his place, but Drama was her middle name. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, down the hall, then the soft thud of her bedroom door closing. Typical, I thought, rolling my eyes. When I finally hung up, the house felt different, too quiet. I wandered into the lounge, flipped the latch on the door, a weird, instinctive thing, and headed upstairs. "Night, Sarah," I yelled, but got no reply. Nothing new there. Morning was a jolt back to reality. Toast, lukewarm tea, and the usual scroll through my phone. Then Sarah walked in, fresh-faced like she'd slept a solid 8 hours. "Where have you been?" I asked, confused. "I thought you were home last night." "I told you Mikey's," she said, grabbing a piece of toast. "Why? What's up?" "But you came home," I stammered, my heart starting to pound. "I heard you." "No, I didn't," she insisted, her brow furrowing. "I haven't been here since yesterday afternoon." A cold dread washed over me. I sprinted to her room, flung the door open. The window was wide, curtains billowing in the breeze, a stark contrast to the still, stale air. The bed looked slept in. The covers were pulled up, but the impression was there, the faint crinkle of disturbed sheets. My blood ran cold. I'd been alone, but not alone. We called Mom and Dad, their voices tight and urgent. Dad, bless him, checked the security camera. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. A man, disheveled, with a scraggly beard, walked through the front door at 10 p.m., exactly when I was on the phone. He left through Sarah's window at 5:30 a.m., 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours I was in that house, completely oblivious, with a stranger. A stranger who'd walked into my home, slept in my sister's bed, and then slipped away like a ghost. The silence of the night suddenly seemed thick, heavy, filled with the unseen presence. I still get shivers thinking about it, The feeling of being watched even now lingers.